I basically use all of those codes and laws as a guide for how I conduct my business and how I treat the people that I serve.
In very much the same way at First Commonwealth, our mission statement is to help improve the financial lives of their neighbors and their businesses. So we start aspirationally, right? We talk about and we understand that Black homeownership rates are far less than non-Latino whites. And we understand the now rates for mortgages are disproportionately impacted. So we start with the aspirational of, we want to help everyone achieve the dream of homeownership. And the way we do that is by starting out with the mission, and then we create educational collaboration and outreach, and then also education, collaboration, and outreach, and then to help with that goal. So, and we do that internally and externally. So internally, we provide education to loan officers so they know their responsibilities under the Fair Housing Act, Equal Credit Opportunity Act, but we also give them some guidance as to the mortgage products so that they can help their customers, regardless of who they are, achieve that goal of home ownership. Externally, we demystify the mortgage process. So we do home buying education with community groups and HUD counseling agencies, WAVE, NeighborWorks, Urban League, etc., to help the customers achieve that. Now, collaboration, it's working as a one unit, right? At a bank, I'm helping loan officers help their customers achieve the dream of home ownership. I'm connecting them with grant programs to minimize out-of-pocket expenses. And then externally, we're going to the communities themselves and working with organizations. We're creating programs with the HUD counseling agencies to help customers receive the support so that they can see it through from the beginning to end. So it's everyone working together. The Fair Housing Act, Equal Credit Opportunity Act is overarching, and it helps us with creating that mission and creating programs to help homeownership.
Thank you so much. And I know, Kevin, if we can go forward, I think 2 slides. I know it's hard to read here. I think maybe 2 more after that. But I'll read off what I'm referring to. So in both the Fair Housing Act and in Pittsburgh City Code, there's a special carve out for people who are involved in real estate transactions. They make a specific point of defining somebody who's a broker or someone who's dealing in the renting or selling of homes. Which gives me the idea that there is some sort of like specific reason that they've done that. So my question for our panelists here is, would you say that real estate professionals play a special role in fair housing? And if that's the case, how so?
Absolutely. I mean, as we mentioned, as I just mentioned, I take it's incumbent upon that loan officer to help someone achieve that dream of home ownership. So when we go through it, we incentivize the loan officer to help that individual. Number one, compensation. If that person doesn't purchase a home, the loan officer does not get compensated. They don't get paid. At First Commonwealth, we also tie our bonus structure to helping low to moderate income families and obtain that dream of home ownership. So 20% of all their loans should be going towards low to moderate income families or those purchasing in low to moderate income census tracts. So we align the incentives to help. And the other reason we do that too is most of our loan officers have 20 plus years of experience. So they know how to work with customers, they know mortgage guidelines. So we've created an environment where we want customers to go to our senior loan officers. And I'm there as the support person to help them, connect them with the different programs if they should need it.
Yeah.
Well, I look at my industry, I look at realtors as sort of the gatekeepers, so to speak, of housing. We're the first people who a buyer will come to, and so when they're looking to purchase a home. And so the city has carved out a very special area specifically for brokers and agents, because if you look back historically, we didn't always live up to the mantra of fair housing. In fact, if you know the history behind fair housing, you know that at some point years and decades ago, we were sort of the impediment to fair housing. So when you see that brokers are now included in a very special section of that, it's because we hold such an important place in the community when it comes to both the dream of homeowners, the public, the options and all the options that are out there. And so I commend the city of Pittsburgh for carving out that special section. It's aspirational for us too. We always strive to do better, and we do have the mechanisms to do so. But this is one opportunity and one section in that allows us to be held accountable, both to the government, but also more importantly to the buyers and sellers out there. So
Thank you so much. If we go to the slide right after this, I'm gonna shut off the light quickly so everyone can see the video. And then Kevin is going right after this, and it should, if you were to press play, it should play.
Homeownership is the heart of the American dream and one of the most reliable ways to build generational wealth for families while bringing stability to neighborhoods. But racial bias and a systemic segregation practice called redlining has prevented many people from taking part in homeownership. What is redlining and what has it cost the city of Pittsburgh? Redlining began in the 1930s when the federal government, banks, and city officials outlined areas in cities where immigrants and people of color lived. These areas were designated as undesirable, hazardous, and declining. As a result, people who lived in these neighborhoods saw their home values decrease while being systematically denied mortgages, construction loans, and home insurance. Redlining became illegal in 1968. Unfortunately, the effect is still very easy to see today because homeownership trends continue to follow the exact same lines that were drawn nearly 100 years ago.
you can still take out those maps and you can put them down over the current layout of the city, and you can see just how pervasive, and you can also see the long-term effects of what redlining has done. It has literally segregated communities by race.
It's clear that we need to stop the effects of redlining, but how? Real estate professionals are on the forefront of housing discrimination. And while most are well-intentioned, limiting housing choices not only continues the legacy of redlining, it is illegal.
So steering is kind of like driving a car. You're actually steering away from something or steering towards something. And so that actually can lead to a neighborhood that they necessarily don't want based on preconceived notions or prejudices. Where an individual maybe don't have a specific neighborhood, but they're steered away from that neighborhood because either A, they don't want that individual who's actually looking at that object to be in that neighborhood, or B, they think this is the best situation.
Pittsburgh's story doesn't need to continue this way. Homeownership grounds people in their communities, allows families to accumulate wealth that passes across generations, and prevents urban sprawl and pollution.
Everybody has the power to make sure that there is equity and equality in housing. And the one way that you can do it is to make sure that you hold those who are the keepers of that promise accountable.
Together, we can close the gap in homeownership. If you are a renter or a home buyer and any of these situations sound familiar, contact us. We are the Pittsburgh Commission on Human Relations. We are here to help create a more equitable and prosperous future for the city of Pittsburgh.
David, who was that handsome guy there? Um, it's funny because what you had just said kind of led us right into that video. I was sitting here before. Um, you know, the legacy of redlining was discussed a little bit in that video, but I wanted to, ask the question again, when people aren't able to have access to the home buying process, what would you say are some of the impacts of that?
Wow, boy, that's a multifaceted question. I'll say this. The effects we can see today, they are very apparent. We can see neighborhoods that have prospered. We can see neighborhoods that have not. Just driving through here today to park my car, it became evident as I moved from one neighborhood to the next. I saw affluence and then I saw decline. The other thing is the amount of, we keep talking about services and infrastructure. I drive through this neighborhood and I don't see a grocery store. But when I drive into a neighborhood just across the way, it's a different scene. So this is just the tip of the iceberg, but that's really the effects of what we've just seen, which is redlining and steering. It's a lost opportunity and lost equity.
It also hurts financial institutions. As a bank, we have a regulatory obligation and also a moral obligation to reinvest into the community. And that means making opportunities available to everyone wherever they decide to purchase. So we just had the Department of Justice fine a bank for allegations of redlining, $9 million. Not only in addition to that, they had to create a de novo branch, a new branch in a majority minority census tract. They had options. So for banks, it's serious, and we take that responsibility seriously by investing in products. When we talked about collaboration and outreach, it's literally going out there to say, we have programs available to help you. It's creating a support network of different organizations and community groups, not just from the bank, but from Catapult Greater Pittsburgh, WAVE, the Urban League, to help support that. And then if it's not responsive, the government has also allowed us under the Equal Credit Opportunity Act to create special purpose credit programs if we're not hitting our objectives, to create special programs to help the underserved communities. So at that time, it has the impact on the community, but also the impact of the local businesses as well. So hopefully that encourages other financial institutions to follow suit and to create programs to help everyone.
Yeah. So,
No, I just wanted to add something, and I wanted to add it when I remember that interview. It's one thing for us to develop the ability to provide the opportunity for home ownership. But what's really important is once the person is in the home, we tend to kind of like say, okay, you got your home and now you're going to enjoy the dream. But there's so much more to home ownership after that. And that's the key. It's great that you can get into a house, but then there's all the factors that come up. Is the community around you being developed, or are you just being put in a particular area? Does that area provide you the educational and transportation opportunities to be able to thrive? And I sometimes think that what we really need is an educational program or educational opportunities that help home ownership while they're in their home. Because too often we see people get into a home and then the expenses and all the things that happen in the home, they tend to lose that home. And then they're right back where they started with. So I think that one of the things that we owe the community moving forward is educational opportunities once they've secured the home.
And those opportunities actually exist today, but not in mass, right? So some grant programs require post-purchase counseling a year afterwards to make sure that the customer has adjusted to becoming a homeowner, provide educational resources as to when air filters need to be replaced and maintenance and things of that sort. But you're absolutely right. And that's why for pre-purchase, we work with organizations to help the customer get in the best position possible. It's not about that transaction, it's about building generational wealth. And you can only do that if the person is in their home 10, 15, 30, 50 years after they purchase that home. So you're absolutely right. There are programs like that, but I think that as we continue as a community, it's continue to develop those programs and have resources available after the fact as well.
Yeah, I think-
Question. So
Yeah.
Can you give us some examples of those programs we were just talking about?
Yeah, so I know that if you purchase, there are some programs, so Hazelwood Initiative, Operation Better Block, Open Hand Ministries, things of that sort, where you have resources after the fact to go. Now, if you find yourself in financial hardship, they can help with loss mitigation and foreclosure prevention, but there are resources after the fact that you can actually talk to someone if you have financial hardship. A lot of these organizations also help with tax reassessments. So if the property gets reassessed after the fact and the payment becomes unmanageable, they can help. You can test that and appeal that. And provide other services as well. So I know those are just some of the organizations. But it's great that when you participate in a program like that, because they're always there. And I always say, you know, like, for example, when Jam and we always do the Urban League class. And at the end of it, I like to say the Urban League's there with you from the beginning to end, not just for the home purchase, but they have other programs as well to help you. And they're always there to pick up the phone. Same thing with the financial institution, with the bank, right? With the realtor. If you have any questions, we're there for life, right? So even though we help you achieve the dream of home ownership, if there is a need after the fact, even if we can't be the ones to remedy that, we can at least point you in the right direction to get help and resources for whatever the case may be.
Any other questions out there in the audience chat?
So, one of the things that you discussed was, there's not a grocery store in certain neighborhoods with businesses and things of that nature. From a banking perspective, is there any initiatives like in the commercial space to put that hand in hand with homeownership? Because that does promote people wanting to move to that neighborhood and creating opportunity there. So one, you're helping the distressed community while also encouraging greater homeownership.
So yes, there is. And, one of the things and part of my job is to help our corporate CRA officer as we engage different community groups who then advocate on behalf to get grocery stores in, say, the Hill District and some other areas. The biggest thing that I'm seeing in terms of home ownership is housing stock, right? So affordable housing stock. A lot of families want to become homeowners. They're pre-qualified, they just can't find a home. So that's why we partner with organizations like Operation Better Block that rehabilitates properties. So it's a gut rehab. They get financing either through local banks or through the Federal Home Loan Bank. That house now is safe, livable, secure. It's being sold at an affordable price. We help that. In addition, the organization then helps the community continue to repeat that cycle once we place them into a home. And then they work on the community as well. And that's why we work with these community partners, because, when they say, hey, this is what we're going towards, this is the services that we need as a financial institution, we can then collaborate with that community group. So yes, there is collaboration between the community groups for various things, housing and services as well.
The next that we'll talk about, and Kevin, I think we're maybe a couple slides down. Yes, this one. I'll read it out because I know it's hard to see. But this is talking about protected classes. We have 7 federally protected classes under the Fair Housing Act. We have race, color, religion, national origin, sex, familial status, and disability. And then we add several more when we talk about the city of Pittsburgh. So I think there are even ones that we're missing off of here, but we've got place of birth, ancestry, sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, status as a victim of domestic violence, citizenship status, preferred language. I know hair and head coverings is missing. The Crown Act, we passed that in 2020. So there are so many different groups of identities that are protected by, or that you're making your work accessible to such a diverse group of people.
Well, I'll start off by saying being here right now is one example of making myself accessible, but other opportunities are focused on being in the communities that we serve. Whether that's through partnerships with other neighborhood groups. Also being cognizant of where we advertise to make sure that when we advertise our services, that we advertise them to a broad community. But one of the best ways that we can serve the community best in my profession is to use the fair housing tools that not only the local association gives us, but also the state and national, that gives us opportunities to enhance our exposure, both in the communities that we serve and also the communities outside as well. So
yeah, and it's participating, being active, engaging community groups. For a financial institution as well, that means employing a diverse workforce as well. And, you know, we have instituted a scorecard where we actually monitor minority and different identities that our employees have. So it's making sure that we bring diversity into the workforce as well. There's no better way of promoting that by having that diverse workforce itself. So
Yeah, well, I'm gonna skip ahead like a couple of,
There was a question.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
go for it.
Says Joe, does your bank have any programs that assist small landlords who are trying to purchase and renovate houses in low income neighborhoods to rent out to housing choice voucher holders?
yeah, and we have several individuals that are interested in doing that right now. I'd love to have a conversation offline. So we do. I'll be able to share my information. You can contact me directly and we can start a conversation.
Okay, yeah, Chuck.
I will just note as well for that individual, if they, you know, are online and go to the URA's webpage, we do have a program called the Small Landlord Fund. That's 0% interest loan for exactly that. So
Yeah, I'll repeat it just in case, because I'm closer to the microphone. But I bet you could also go to the URA's sort of vendor booth online and get to their website, but they have a program called, it was the Small Landlord Fund, for landlords starting out and hoping to rent. Yes, there's
yeah, but specifically for landlords that have 10 units or less.
10 units or
you
fewer.
know, 0% interest loan. And then it can go to housing choice voucher holders or individuals making a certain area median income.
Oh, very cool. Okay. Any other questions online? Kevin? Yeah. I was gonna say, Joe, you touched on something that I was gonna bring up later. So it's interesting, the Fair Housing Act. It mostly talks about, you know, the process of renting, you know, selling, buying a home, but it does have this carve out that talks about associations, and it makes it so that it's almost as if it's an employment protection. It makes it so that associations of people, of real estate professionals cannot have discriminatory terms of their membership, or they can't be turned away from like the multi-list because of their protected class identity. So I was curious, you know, to see, you know, how that's played out in your sort of community of practice.
I think it goes back to that aspirational of what we try to do as a financial institution by being as inclusive as possible to demystifying the mortgage process, by giving the tools and associating ourselves and bringing everyone to the table. I think that's the biggest thing. So it's not that we say we have to do X, Y, and Z, or we check compliance. It's we want to do this at the very beginning. And by doing that, that's how we usually avoid any issues with violations of the Fair Housing Act. But we also check compliance to this. You know, we have a compliance team, we review this and monitor. And if we do notice, sort of like that special purpose credit program, if we're not living up to our expectations, we can then remedy. And I think the biggest thing as a financial institution is we work with our compliance teams, we work with community groups, we receive input, but the best way of doing this is not by creating silos, but by tearing him down, where we work with everyone within the financial institution to go, we need to do X, Y, and Z, and then we can go out and do that. I think the problem exists where you step afoul of fair housing when right hand doesn't know what the left hand's doing. There's no coordination. The beautiful thing about working in fair housing and supporting access to home ownership is bringing everyone to the table and taking suggestions and finding better ways of doing it and then being able to implement it.
I think that you hit on the, you mentioned the multi-list and, you know, back in the day, way back in the day, you know, real estate was held very close and it wasn't an overly transparent process. But I will say that in the last 5 to 10 years, we've seen that not only transparency has been at the forefront of the real estate transaction, but education as well. The Fair Housing Act and the Fair Housing laws hold us accountable. Okay, and we have organizations in Pittsburgh that hold real estate practitioners accountable. But what's even more important is that we now mandate fair housing as a component of not only the process of getting a license to sell, but also in keeping it. And that wasn't always the case. And so I will say to the general public at large, we are creating a more transparent process, but we're also fixed on the fact that fair housing just doesn't happen in the month of April. It happens every day of every year.
Yeah, thank you so much. One question that I have for both of you is about two terms that I've heard. I wonder if you have a perspective, if you a definition. So there's steering and reverse redlining. And I wanted to know if you have a definition that you use and, you know, if how it would work in the home buying process.
Well, I have a definition for steering, and that it's pretty simple. That steering is a way of, in my mind, of convincing or subtly suggesting where a person should consider living or not. And we can do that in many different ways. We can do that by asking very close-ended questions to people. We can also steer by when someone says where they would like to live, we then pre-select for them rather than giving them the opportunity to make the choices themselves. Reverse redlining, I have to admit, that's a new term for me, but if I just had to use the mechanics of the term itself, it would be basically focusing more on those areas that we have disenfranchised over years and taking the resources that some of the communities that have benefited over the decades of being propped up, we would use those resources to help those communities that for decades have been underserved.
And then for me, reverse redlining is when loan terms and things of that are more restrictive for certain classes. Interest rates are higher, things of that sort. You know, we have created, and there's mechanisms within the banking industry to protect against that, where, you know, interest rates are determined by credit score and the loan size, right? So regardless of race, sex, national origin, religion, everyone gets that same interest rate. But we also, our compliance team takes a look at and breaks it down to what interest rate is being offered to certain classes. And we take a look at that periodically to say, are we doing our job? And that's why the special purpose credit program is so important, because the federal government came by and say, you can take a look at that and you can create special programs that if someone is being disproportionately affected by, say, loan interest rates, then we can make adjustments. We can create programs to help that community. So the government has given us more tools and allowed us to take a look at that to make sure we're serving the needs of the entire community.
Thank you. Here's a question. Is there anything that you would discourage any of your fellow real estate professionals from doing? Something that you say, you know, that's not helping us forward.
I think the biggest thing is we've created a culture at First Commonwealth where if you have someone that's interested in purchasing a home and they're interested in certain programs that you're not familiar with, come and ask. We're more than happy to help everyone. And that's one of the nice features about being in this space for 10, 20 years is we've worked with the URA, we've worked with Housing Authority, Action Housing, we've worked with all these grant programs. We've helped customers that have been denied elsewhere get the resources needed. I think the biggest thing is if there are any questions, raise your hand and ask, you know, because the answer is no, sorry, you don't qualify for a mortgage. The answer is for the programs that I'm familiar with, I don't know of any programs, but continue to seek those resources because we're out there and we can help provide some guidance. So for me, I would say the biggest thing is continue fight to find a way to say yes and continue searching.
Well, as an instructor of fair housing, it's always an interesting point in the classroom discussion when I get questions from practitioners who have been in the business for a very long time. And I'm always surprised at some of the questions that come up that would, to me, seem fairly easy to answer. But it reminds me of the fact that we have made progress with regard to fair housing, but we still have a ways to go. And I would suggest that one of the ways that we can hold practitioners accountable, and which I've seen in other instances throughout the country, is that we need to stop assuming what our clients need. And we need to start empowering our clients to be able to make the decisions that are best for them. And what I mean by that is when I was talking about steering, I'll give you an example. When in my profession, when you're asking somebody, you know, like they're saying, I would like to buy a house in this price range. Well, there are other questions to ask on top of that. But sometimes we're so focused on just the price. And then we start to select the neighborhood that we think that price range will fit. Well, there may be other neighborhoods that we haven't considered that may be a better fit. And so when I heard the question realtors could do to minimize the potential of violating a statute in fair housing, and that is making and letting our client decide what's best for them. We can provide the tools to make that dream possible. But each one of us in this room has the ability to make the decisions that are important for themselves. But remember to hold people like me accountable. Make sure that you ask questions and that you give the feedback that you want to see in the dream that you want to achieve.
You know, it's. And what I mean, and I'll just clarify my comments because it goes very much to what Dave was saying. It's, we don't, hey, your first time home buyer, FHA is the way to go. It's taking a look at the customer situation, finding the options that best suits their needs, creating and finding where they want to purchase, finding grant programs to help minimize out-of-pocket expenses. The answer is, okay, so we checked FHA, we checked conventional loan programs. Now we have some special programs. Have you taken a look at that? It's always continuously try to find a way to help the customer. And even if the answer is no right now, we cannot pre-qualify you to purchase a home. It's finding the resources to work on credit, to build assets for down payment and reserves. It's finding a way to say yes, even if it's not right now, if it's 6 months to a year down the road.
Yeah. And would you say on the reverse side, is there any one thing that you found to be invaluable, a practice that you found to be invaluable for yourself to make sure that you're following what your goal is in terms of fair housing?
You mentioned it earlier, it's about accessibility, I think, right? It's being present, it's being attentive to the needs of the customer. It's helping the person that's in front of you, whether they're purchasing a $30,000 home or a $1.5 million home, right? It's helping everyone achieve that dream of home ownership because for them, that's the most important purchase. And for most homeowners, that wealth built from home ownership is the primary driver of that wealth, right? So we want to help absolutely everyone. So being attentive, being accessible, and meeting customers where they are. We were talking earlier, it's interesting that before it was, let's set up a meeting, let's meet in person, but now there's Zoom meetings that we can have with customers. We can meet them 11 o'clock on a Saturday or 8 o'clock on a Sunday and still be able to reach customers. It's helping everyone, meeting them where they are.
I just want to say, as a little twist to that question, one of the most important aspects of real estate, and especially with real estate agents, is ask yourself, is the agent that you're working with an advocate for you, but also an advocate for your community? And what I mean by that is that agents have tools. Like, for instance, in this room right now, we happen to have the executive vice president of the Realtors Association of Metropolitan Pittsburgh. Within that association, we have a team of people who advocate on behalf of homeowners. And that's really important because not only is it just the purchase of the home, but it's also making sure that the community has services and that the community doesn't fall into the cracks with regard to the local governments. I mean, let's face it, local government has a great deal of control and a great deal of say of how the communities will look. So for you to have an advocate to be there to make sure to not only hold people like me accountable, but also hold our elected officials accountable as well, is probably one of the most important characteristics that you should seek in an agent, but also you should seek in everything that you do when you're selecting the community that you want to call home.
And the other thing too is partnership, right? So it's partnership between the lender, the realtor, the community organization as well. And we hold each other accountable too. There's been plenty of times where realtors have questions about an individual's situation. can they do this? Can they do that based on where they're looking to purchase? Are they available for this grant program or that grant program? And that's okay. And we encourage that because we're all here as one team to help the customer achieve that dream. And accountability goes both ways.
Are you going to have something?
Yeah, so, for the person that would be seeking out a realtor or seeking out a bank. We talk about, there's advocates, there's people that have better report cards. How is a person that would be trying to buy a home, how would I know who to work with? Is there anything that helps me identify who's better or worse at this, or who is more of an advocate or anything like that? Because I think, being somebody that purchased a home not that long ago, I would have had no idea about any of that, from my perspective as a buyer.
Well, I think from my end, there are a lot of scorecards out there. I mean, you can go online and Google search, top rated agents. And of course, a lot of times those services are usually based on production or how much the person has paid into that particular service to get their name up to the top. What I would say is I would look at the community both online and look for people that are engaged in the community. There are agents locally within your own neighborhoods. And if you have any questions about that, you can also reach out to both the local association. But one of the best resources is also asking local lenders, because a lot of times they have a pulse on people who specialize in certain programs and certain aspects of the process. So when we're sharing this idea about collaboration, that's probably one of the best resources you can use. And also one of the best resources is the URA. We could have a panel on just those resources, but those are the groups that really have the feet on the ground. And so I would encourage looking at those avenues as potential opportunities as well.
And for choosing a lender, it depends on where you're looking to purchase and what programs you're interested in. Right now, own PGH, which is collaboration between the URA and HACP, there's only so many banks that participate, and we're one of those banks. But it's asking those questions. It's an interview process. As you interview realtors, you interview the bank as well. What programs do you have available for first-time home buyers? Do you have any down payment and closing cost assistance to help minimize my out-of-pocket experience? How much experience do you have with these programs? Very important question. So you're building a team as a first-time home buyer, and you're the CEO of your own experience. And what you want to do is build your team with professionals that are looking out for your best interests, that understand the programs and can help you achieve what you're trying to do. So it's not just finding any old bank. You could find banks online, but do they know the programs that you're interested in? So at that point, it's an interview process. Talk to your local lender, and there's a lot of loan officers out there. So even if the bank is good, you may be talking to the wrong loan officer. At that point, if you ask those poignant questions, you'll get an answer of, hey, you need to talk to so-and-so. They know the programs, they can help you with that. So it's finding the right fit, not just the institution, but the loan officer. Same thing with the agents. It's not about the broker, it's about the particular agent you're working with, and can they help you achieve your dream.
The only thing that I would add, because I'm not, in a real estate professional, is that one thing that's kind of unique about mortgage bankers and about certain real estate agents is a lot of them will post, a bio online when you go to look them up. And, they don't have to put a lot of information. Both Joe and David, if you're to look at their bios, it says a whole lot about the stuff that they've been involved in. And that gives you kind of an idea of who's involved in the community. And even if maybe that person's not available to help you with your particular thing, if you want to reach out, they probably have a colleague who they would recommend. So, if you look up your realtor, there's a lot of information. You look up another realtor, they're involved with their local association, they're involved in the community, then it gives you kind of an idea of who is kind of looking out for the community. I would think. I don't know if you all would agree.
No, I would agree. I mean, there, like I said, there are so many sites out there that rate agents. And, you know, a majority of them, you kind of have to look with a grain of salt. But if you dive deep and Google search or search whatever engine you're using, you will find agents that will fit the criteria that you're looking for. My philosophy is it's not a paycheck, it's a partnership. And so that's been my mantra going forward. And I know a lot of professionals out there that have the same philosophy.
If we go for a couple of slides. One more, I think maybe one more after this. Oh, another one. Okay, this is a hard picture to see, but this is thinking about the recent sort of trend we've seen in appraisal bias. So there's been a trend, probably sparked by people being more vocal, because I wouldn't say that it's a new trend, but people being more vocal about seeing if there is a bias when they do a home appraisal. And one of the things that people have done is to, particularly Black people, have removed artwork, removed pictures of their family, and set up sort of things that would not betray the idea that they are African American. And when they've done that, before they get an appraisal and they do that, and then after, their home is appraised for a higher amount. And it's kind of sort of betrayed what's been happening probably for several years. I know, well, I don't know that neither of you are appraisers, but I don't know of you to be appraisers. But you know, from the outside looking in, say about this trend, and what do you think we could be doing about it?
So it does exist. There have been some cases where we have questioned values of appraisals. What we have done, and as mortgage bankers, there's some protections already in place to kind of weed this out. Number one, we use an appraisal management company that takes a look at the appraisal and evaluates based on recent sale and comparables. Does this make sense? The other thing is Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae evaluate appraisals as well. So we input the information and it spits a score back as this is reliable, this is not reliable. So when we evaluate appraisals, we have some information. And what we have also done is if we are questioning the value of the appraisal, we'll get a second appraisal and we'll say, you know, there's some red flags here that we have found, something just doesn't add up. We will get a second appraisal and do a cross, you know, comparison between the two to try to determine value. So, you know, whenever there is any questions regarding that, we take it very seriously. And I think that as mortgage bankers, because this is a hot topic right now, everyone's paying more attention to it. So we're taking measures to make sure that the appraisals we are getting are fair values. So
I think the answer is pretty simple in one respect. If you look at the appraisal industry right now, a majority of the appraisers are white. It's an overwhelmingly older white group. And so the answer to that is, which has been discussed, is opening up the process and streamlining it and making it easier to become an appraiser, and by diversifying the appraisal industry, so that things like this won't happen. And that has been on the topic, and it's been on the discussion for the last year and a half. You're going to see it come to the forefront in the next couple of years. And so I encourage anybody, if you have a friend or whatever, to get into the appraisal industry, but also know that we take it very seriously as well. However, realtors have been pulled away from any kind of attachment to the appraisal process. So all we can do really is advocate on behalf of diversity within the industry itself.
And if you don't mind me adding to your comments, this is one of those examples when your realtor can be an advocate for you, because they can study the market and they can easily see if there could possibly be an issue relative to valuation.
Correct.
And also customers receive a copy of that appraisal as well. So we send them a copy of the appraisal and they're supposed to receive it at least prior to closing. So it's a review of that appraisal and ask the questions. If you do see something that isn't right, you can definitely ask the question, and us as a lender will examine that as well.
Thank you both. Well, I'm gonna open it up for any questions that might be out there, either online or in the room, for our panelists or for me, if you're interested.
Sorry if I ask questions.
Well, I had actually one question that I didn't write down that I was gonna ask you all. So one of the things people don't always think about is reasonable accommodations in the home buying process. A lot of people think about it for the home, but not the process. So have you ever been asked for a reasonable accommodation, and is there anything creative you've ever come up with?
So I think it's easier now with just modes of communication and being accessible as before, right? So we have helped with modifications to homes and making more accessible, etc. But it's having that conversation, meeting the customers, and especially in community development and as a loan officer, it's meeting the customer wherever they need in whatever mode that may be, whether it's online, in person. It might be me going to see them, right? Because they can't do something. So it's being accessible. I think that's the biggest driver is. So do I have any interesting stories? No, I think it's, I've gone to houses before and sat there and met them where they were. And it's just trying to find whatever's best for the customer. And, a lot of the issues that I see, and sometimes they're just misunderstandings, is due to communication, accessibility. So just trying to be present and meeting them where they are. I think that's the biggest thing.
May I
Yeah.
offer you an assist?
Yeah.
We do, whenever necessary, provide interpretation services for the hearing impaired or for foreign language services. I help coordinate that, so I'm able to give an assist on that. So we do provide any interpretation services that are necessary.
Very cool, thank you.
Yeah, I will piggyback on what he said. Yeah, it is, we are in a different time where now we have different ways of communicating. Zoom has obviously given us the ability to reach people who might have challenges with meeting in person. One of the ideas that I've incorporated in one of my sites is for people that are sight impaired to be able to have a website that speaks to them. But here's the other part and it kind of ties in with your question about how to find an agent and how do you know what. You also have the opportunity to advertise and to be present at events and at areas in the communities that we serve. So, what I mean by that is that, are you advertising in different publications that serve a diverse community, not just one? Are you at events that have a diverse population? And also think about taking on a community that you might not necessarily have considered a community that you understand or know, and challenge yourself and become a part of that community and figure out ways to advertise and to encourage people to come to you as the advocate for that. But I will say that opening up the process has been one of the biggest challenges. And if anything good came out of COVID, one of those things has been the ability to actually use technology, Zoom, to actually be able to connect with people who we haven't been able to in the past.
Thank you so much. Just one brief follow-up, Joe, you mentioned something like a reasonable modification, working with somebody on that. When somebody goes into the home buying process and they're looking for reasonable modifications, do they tend to do that before or after they start the home buying process?
Usually it's before, and you know, there's a number of organizations like Dawn Services in Lawrence County and Washington County that actually advocate for the borrower, and they will come to us and say they need to make some modifications. And then we have rehabilitation loan programs that we may be able to utilize. PHFA offers services, URA, and some other programs as well. So it's finding the right fit for them, what program works. So usually that's done prior to, but even if it's during the process, we can talk through what programs will best suit their needs for whatever they're trying to do. And sometimes it depends upon the scale of the project. You know, some projects are 15,000 or less. We go up to 75,000 in some cases, and even beyond that as well.
Very cool. Oh, I didn't know that. Well, if we don't have any other questions, I'm gonna release everyone to be able to take a look at some of the things we have set up in our resource room and to grab something to eat or to drink before we have our lunch plenary. But thank you both to David and oh, okay, yep, one question.
To Joe, which parties to the transactions are you finding that challenge the appraisal?
The borrower, it's usually the buyer. We will provide a copy and we don't see many sellers argue that. It's usually the buyer. Also realtors will come up and say, because realtors are involved in the transaction, they're the ones that set or help the seller with the purchase price. They'll say this is a reasonable, price for the house. And then if we see huge variations, then at that point, the realtor usually helps the buyer or seller. So we've seen it on both sides, but realtors are usually involved. They'll say, based on the comparables, this is how, I would value the house. So we have seen one seller, one buyer so far.
When you say the borrower, is it a
The
situation
buy, yeah.
that they're thinking, this is way higher than I thought? They're thinking this isn't going to meet the necessary value for me to be able to have the mortgage.
For the buyer, they want to make sure that they're purchasing something and their investment is protected. So they're saying, is this the true value of the house? And if I purchase it, if I need to sell it, will I get the money back out of it? So as an investment, the buyer wants to protect their interest. As a lender, we want to make sure that we're lending on the true value of the house. We don't want the customer to be underwater, etc. For the seller, it's making sure that they're getting, the amount that's fair for them as well. So it's ensure a fair transaction, that the buyer's purchasing it for a fair price and that all parties are protected.
Yeah, thanks for that question. Well, I will let everyone go, but thank you so much, David and Joe. I really
Thank you.
appreciated talking to you today.
Thank you. Thank you.
And thank you all for coming. If you need anything, need to find anything, feel free to come up and ask me. We've got a couple of resource tables set up in the